I am NetMoverSitan. And after taking down their second distortion, the human thunderbolts, Moses, Ezra, and Vesper, along with Uriah, had a worse problem to deal with in the form of the sweepers. Chapter 34. The Night in the Backstreets. The sweepers were coming for them in 3 waves. They would have to endure all of them. As for whether or not they could make it through, Ezra admitted that she used up all her strength fighting the human thunderbolts and its reanimated corpses. Moses was incapable of combat right now, so Vesper estimated that they'd survive 2 waves. Okay, if it's too much for a grade 1 fixer like him, you know there. Uriah's workshop was also not an option for them to hide in, as she's not at her best right now. They heard the corpses of those that lost the fights and murders that happen in the Backstreets, like they're on a schedule, being cleaned up by the sweepers. All of them would be cleaned up by, before the next work shift. She opened communications with Han Hee-jun. Yeah. She's desperate if she's willfully communicating with him outside of notifying him about captured distortions. She commented on how she's working night and day. Moses apologized for disturbing his sleep, and he identified their location as the Backstreets of District 12 during the night in the Backstreets. She asked if the Ujat can be called there. Han Hee-jun doubted that they'd be of any help by the time they arrived to deal with the sweepers, as the 3 of them would be dead. So the option to sit and wait for them to save them, that's been thrown out the window. She asked about the border between the Backstreets and the Nest. Was it still up? Han Hee-jun hinted that it was. Besides, you should know better than he does, considering her background. As for the shortest route, according to him, it's 5 kilometers to the west. She ended the call, and the plan was simple. Go in a straight line towards the Nest, as the sweepers, they don't touch the Nest. They only touch the Backstreets. So, it doesn't matter if the Nest had fallen. The Nests are outside of their field of operation. Vesper asked about the van, and Moses told him that they'd leave it there until the night in the Backstreets was over. It wouldn't be attacked if they're not in it. As for whether or not they'd treat the distortions as humans, she told Ezra not to ask her what they think. It's a risk worth taking, as their lives take priority over 2 distortions. They also lack the time to think about that. Ezra told Vesper to pick Moses up, while she used her hammer and gauntlets to make a direct way to their destination. Vesper readied his sword with his free arm. Ezra broke through the brick wall easily, although when it comes to a house, she had to be stopped by Vesper, as it's another taboo to destroy residential areas during the night in the Backstreets. Okay, so that's recording video footage in District 14 and destroying residential areas during the night in the Backstreets. Yeah, those are two taboos. Well, that didn't apply during the giant carp case when he burst through that door. So that 2-story house that they were in front of, that was safe. Also, the taboo regarding residential areas during the night in the Backstreets, that applies to the entire city, not just that district. Violating that one, well, a taboo hunter or two would be the least of their worries during that almost lawless hour. I say almost lawless as the residential area is in violence. The head wouldn't be too happy with them if they demolish any part of the residential area. So it's safe to say that at least a high-grade fixer office would be hired to take care of them if they violated that taboo, if not an arbiter or a claw. Well, they certainly send the latter to take care of tax evaders and patent violators. Besides, no one would open the door for them. In fact, even the fingers wouldn't violate that taboo. They'd more likely wait until the night was over before breaking into someone's home over protection money. Ezra asked what they should do, and Moses heard at least 3 people sobbing in the house. Then the sweepers showed up in the mist. If a path was open, they would go through it. They have no fear of death. They would not give up. Their only desire was to feed. They even cleaned their own up. Their orange hooks liquefy the victim, and this fuels them. Moses found it strange that they were called humans by the head. Ezra readied herself for battle. Moses asked Vesper to put her down. The destroyed wall gave the fixers defending against them an advantage. Yeah, it's another 300 Spartans moment with the yard of the residents. Vesper sliced the sweepers one by one. Ezra hit one on the head with an accelerated fist, leaking out the liquid that they were made from, while Vesper cut another in half. The sweepers that followed them absorbed the liquid that made up the slain just by stepping on it. After 23 of them were killed, Vesper's blade was losing its edge, and Ezra's fists were getting slower. They were starting to recover damage faster than Vesper and Ezra were dealing it. This was clearly before Library of Ruina got to the urban nightmare part of the story, as the sweepers still had enough numbers to make up the losses. And this was only the first wave. It was 3:40. 10 minutes before the second wave would catch up with them. They would struggle to make 100 meters west, never mind the rest of the way. Moses had one option. It was unlikely to work, but with the lost edge of Vesper's Hundo and Ezra's gauntlets running out of power, what was there to lose from knocking on the door of the residents? She gave them her name, her grade, and affiliation, asking them to open the door for the 3 of them, with Ezra offering to pay them for this service to them. The one inside told them that they just want to live and asking them to leave them alone. Ezra understood that it was a house that wasn't going to help them. Moses understood that they needed to move to the west. Vesper picked her up, and then he and Ezra kept moving, and Moses advised either jumping over or going around anything in their way, as they don't want to check if anywhere was part of a residential area. Moses understood that travelling 5 kilometers in 10 minutes would be a difficult task in their current state. They crossed the walls, running through narrow passages, but they ran out of time. Moses warned both of them as sweepers swarmed through both ends of a long alleyway. Moses contacted Han Hee-jun, asking if the arm that was provided her had any combat functionalities. Han Hee-jun told her that it didn't. Are you kidding me? Why would that arm that's a fixer that engages in combat not have combat functionalities? I mean, her previous arm had a hidden weapon. Moses asked, what was his boastful statement of that arm being one of a kind and expensive about? It turned out that it was for the tracking equipment, communication, and its durability. Moses hung up in frustration. Ezra and Vesper were being pushed back, comparing it to a leaking dam being stopped by just a palm. Ultimately pointless. They were victims of bad timing, facing the sweepers right after their battle against the human thunderbolts. Ezra would try to protect Moses, as by her own admission, she lacked the strength to take on a single sweeper. She's dead weight around this time. She considered breaking the door down behind her. They might be able to survive the night. But she understood that breaking the taboo of the city was quite different to breaking the taboo of a nest, which would send death their way faster than they'd be capable of running while Yakety Sax was playing in the background. She's neither suicidal nor is she stupid. She wants to survive in order to settle what was left unsettled. She decided to let out red breath, but Vesper shot her pipe out of her hand, telling her not to get any ideas, to not do anything that would risk her life. He told her that he can stop the first 2 waves, even though he was visibly covered in injuries. Moses knocked on the door. She did this while the other 2 shielded her. Moses introduced herself, her grade, and her affiliation, offering generous compensation in exchange for shelter for a short while. There was no response at first, but the old steel door opened up. Moses told the others to get in, likely wanting to do so before whoever opened up the door reconsidered. This door was quickly shut once they got through. She thanked them for their kindness. Then they found out who would like to make a deal with them. The golden insignia and the dark red coats. Oh, it's the fun. A star of the city, grade syndicate, one of the fingers. She silently told Vesper not to attack them. This wasn't the time. And besides, Han Hee-jun advised against provoking them. That and they were near collapse, not at their best. There was 20 from Soldatos against 3 fixers that would have been sweeper chow if they didn't open the door. Specifically on the order of Isabel, a capo of the fun, and a cigar smoker. Well, thankfully, Moses was aware of fun etiquette, so she submitted herself to the couple's authority, lowering her head and grasping her hand when offered without making eye contact. Clearly understanding that mutilation is the penalty for breach of this etiquette, as she was a grade 5 fixer. Capo Isabel noted strange things occurring in that nest, and that's putting it mildly. She needed proper info because of the fog, and she's fortunate to have a fixer with 7 Association affiliation with her. After having a drink, she asked about the grades of the other fixers. Moses introduced Ezra as a grade 3. Yeah, a grade 3 fixer of 7 Association. While she'd rather not disclose Vesper's real name and grade, preferring to introduce him as a grade 3, like Ezra. He forced the matter and gave his real name, grade, and mentioned they had no association affiliation. This was probably a good thing, as a grade 1 fixer was equal to a capo. Although Capo Isabel was questioning his honesty with this matter, so Vesper put his hand in his pocket, which resulted in the 20 from Soldatos readying their matchlock rifles at them. Okay, matchlock? Yeah, clearly the ethics law is that restricted in places. Well, Capo Isabel gestured them to hold their fire, understanding that their guests knew that they're neither stupid nor suicidal. Vesper took out his fixer license and threw it in front of her. She checked it and it was legitimate. After this was confirmed, she offered them rest, and they could talk about this deal when the sun was up. The Soldatos lowered their weapons after Vesper confirmed that he was a grade 1. Yeah, the Thumb were a gang of mobsters obsessed with class and authority. Yeah. And finding out that he's a grade 1, that resulted in a change of attitude. Capo Isabel ordered the Soldatos to provide them with blankets and pillows, along with a room to rest in. They were led there to a small house, with a floor space of around 70 square meters. They clearly don't use it as a base of operations. They gave Vesper a courteous nod, which was silently asking for permission to speak. He nodded apathetically, wanting to get this over with. They offered to clear the room up for them. And that was a good thing too, as that residence had 3 bodies of varying sizes, bludgeoned to death, likely with the buttstocks of the rifles, rather than using expensive ammo, as even ammo is ruining the expensive. Yeah. Ruining the expensive, never mind the guns. It was clear that they were killed because they needed a space to shelter for the night in the Backstreets. The firm can get away with that sort of thing. Moses had to caution Vesper not to kill them, despite his hatred for the firm. He was resisting all temptation to do so, despite his personal desire and burning hatred of them. Besides, they needed to regain their strength in order to be of any use in combat, especially as Capo Isabel clearly had some use for them. Well, they do owe her. Next we have Chapter 35, This Territory. The respite of that room didn't feel like that. It was similar to her normal living space. Except that living space had the smell of blood. Ezra was fast asleep, snoring. Vesper was gazing at the door, clutching on his Huando. It's unclear if he slept at all. So Moses asked if he had any sleep. Vesper answered that he's had enough rest, so that she didn't have to worry about his condition. They likely took some HP tablets before they went to sleep to recover their strength. Then someone knocks on the door. It was a Soldato, as they weren't speaking. Vesper told them to speak, and the Soldato was Rami, a Thumb Soldato checking if they've woken up. Vesper had to speak to them, as a grade 5 fixer like Moses wasn't allowed to mention a Capo's name. He asked if Capo Isabel was asking to see them. She was, wanting to talk with them over a simple breakfast. He told them that they'll be there soon. Moses found it fortunate to have a grade 1 fixer like Vesper with her. He'd make their negotiation with the Thumb smoother, if he can resist the urge to slaughter them. Moses woke Ezra up, and apparently she was eating something in a dream she had prior to be woken up. Yeah, typical Ezra, thinking with your stomach. They then went to the living room, and bacon and eggs was set on a round table of 4. Capo Isabel asked them to take a seat. Moses and Ezra understood from etiquette and obey her. Capo Isabel wanted to know what a grade 1 fixer and a couple of 7 association fixers were doing there, asking if they had anything to do with a takeover of El Corp's nest. Vesper was annoyed as he stuck his fork into a strip of bacon, likely due to having to interact with this Thumb Capo without being able to kill her by chopping her head off. He told her that he works for Dr. Moses, devolving all of his authority and power to her. He doesn't hide his irritation. He clearly knows about the rule of Thumb authority transfer, although this is quite rare among the Thumb. In fact, she asked if he was an affiliate of the Thumb. No. He's killed some from one of your subsidiaries. Oh, wait, you don't need to know about that. Moses didn't want to get off topic, now that she could speak on more equal terms. She told Ezra to clean the table, as they lacked the time for a full meal. Ezra wasn't happy about that, but she complied. And while she and the Soldatos were clearing up the mess, Capo Isabel discussed the deal. Moses understood that of the 5 fingers, the thumb was the strongest in terms of organizational power. It controlled a legion of subsidiary syndicates. They only rallied together when it came to matters of the most importance. Yeah, they don't meet up unless the local Sotocapo requires it. But if a capo and soldatos are there, they couldn't rely on subsidiary syndicates, likely due to the fog covering the nest, which makes organizational capability more difficult. Moses observed their desperation, although she also understood that she and the other fixers owed her. Or more specifically, the thumb who she represents at this point, due to them saving the 3 of them from the sweepers, so they can't refuse whatever deal that Capo Isabel was about to offer. Speaking of which, Moses wanted to hear about her offer. Capo Isabel wanted her to give an introduction of herself and her colleagues. This wouldn't have any effect on the outline of the offer, but she might change that. Well, the minor details of it. At least take it into consideration. She poured liquor as she was saying this. Okay, isn't it a bit early to be drinking alcohol? Moses told her that she's the Distortion detective, and Ezra and Vesper assist her with that. Now, this got Capo Isabel's attention, as there were likely to be several sightings of the Distortion in Elcorb's nest, which might motivate them to hand over info about the cases of the Distortion there. Either that or they might see the 3 of them as something to add to the strife within the nest. Well, Capo Isabel was impressed that she has a grade 3 and a grade 1 under her employ. Well, Ezra did so out of loyalty to Moses. As for Vesper, Moses was partially responsible for him losing his job with Encore, and he's with them in the hopes that he can get his job back. Unfortunately, she'll have to take Moses' word for it, as outside of the fog can't really be reached to check the facts with the firm's southern HQ. According to Capo Isabel, there will be bloodshed in Elcorb's nest in the near future. They're preparing for the fight, but they don't need Moses, Ezra, and Vesper to fight alongside them. They have a problem with the logistics side of it, specifically with the workshops in the nest that are supplying them with musket ammo. Yeah, if we didn't know any better, we'd think that firearm technology had regressed. But that's just how they, get around the ethics law. That and a musket can have a buttstock especially adapted to, deliver some heavy blunt force trauma. It'd certainly be strong enough to crack the unaugmented skull of any that displeased them. Ezra was interested in that, believing that she could get her hands on normally unavailable goods. Goods that only the Thumb can get. Okay, have you already forgotten about Yuria? Your own personal workshop maester? Regardless, Moses understood that they wanted to find out what happened to them. Capo Isabel silently confirmed this. Moses asked Capo Isabel what they'd get in return. She asked Moses what she wanted. And what Moses wanted, or rather needed, was info on the distortion phenomenon occurring in that nest. It ties into what she needs to do. They need to get back to the van at some point. This was due to the Thumb having a reliable network. Although Capo Isabel understood that they'd update them with regular news concerning them. But sadly, it's not that easy at this point, as their communications aren't that reliable on the fog. Although she'd ask the other capos when she contacts their HQ later, and hand any information that they know of to them then. Moses appreciated Vesper's part in smoothing over the dialogue, as it would have been much harder without him. Capo Isabel was also quite reasonable with what she was asking for. For saving their lives from the sweepers. Moses shakes the hand of Capo Isabel, basically telling her that she has a deal, and asks her for more information about the case of lost ammo and, the location of the workshop that they're looking into. They'd need to know where to go in order to investigate it. Sometime after that, they were walking the streets, which were brighter than it was at night, but still dim and blurry due to the fog. They were heading in the general direction of the workshop that Capo Isabel told them about. Ezra was happy that she was seeing a workshop with ties to the Thumb. Vesper was less enthusiastic. Moses understood that he had a personal grievance with the Thumb, for reasons unclear to her. Moses asked if Ezra knew much about the workshop that the Thumb pays for the services for. Ezra said that she did, but she had many questions. She knows little. Well, they all know little about the thumb except what is commonly known. Well, Vesper probably knows a little more than most. There was a lack of friction with the thumb with this job in general. Moses asked what she did know. Ezra told them that they use muskets and use a variety of bullets, including shock, cryo, fire, and explosive. They picked the right ones for what's needed. Well, they can't just buy a whole lot of bullets due to the ethics law. Not to mention the expense of the bullets themselves. Yeah, you can thank the head for that. Which is why they throw money at workshops whenever a purge happens. And Vesper silently told them that he had a history with them due to one of their purges. And I'm not talking about a series of movies where one night a year anything goes, as that's pretty much any night in the Backstreets. Well, almost anything goes. As previously stated, residential areas are off limits. Ammo is not used lightly. Besides, even without bullets, the muskets can be used as highly effective blunt force instruments. Due to the reinforced buttstocks, apparently it's made of the hardest wood in the city. Deceptively simple. But it uses technologies from many workshops. That includes acceleration and mass manipulation. Likely to do with the melee aspect of the weapon. Well, it certainly can't do too much with the actual shooting, because armor-piercing weapons violates the ethics law. Although, it doesn't say anything about the weapon breaking someone's jaw at melee range. Vesper asked if it's so entertaining. Yeah, he was having a problem with talking about the thumb, and the look he was giving Ezra was provoking her. Well, not in the way that he'd expect, as Ezra confirmed that it was. She found it fun to talk about workshops. Vesper was struggling to hide his irritation, asking if she was hit by one of their buttstocks. Clearly Vesper's patience was at its limit, asking her to refrain from talking about that while he's within hearing range, even threatening to cut her tongue off. He grabbed the hilt of his Huando, indicating that he wasn't around. Ezra was giving a serious look at him, a look that she had during the smoke war. Her voice could chill the air. She was getting sick of this, telling him to not give that kind of look in front of the detective. Moses was irritated by those 2 time bombs. Ezra told him that they've been through a war, a hellish time, worse than anything that he's ever experienced. confused. This provoked him into fighting her, asking what does she know about him. Ezra didn't give a telling him not to invoke the memories of war for the detective. The expression of his eyes was doing that. Vesper asked how can she talk about killing people so gleefully after suffering a war. Ezra answered that it's the only way that she knows how to cope, to seek joy and don't be serious. Ezra quickly gripped Vesper's neck with her hand, and Vesper grasped her neck in response. Moses told Ezra to stop this. She complied, even though she'd rather continue the fight, apologizing to Moses for her carelessness. Vesper let go of her neck as well. She told Vesper that they were working on overcoming their past events in their own ways, much as he is with his. They're banding together because they need to, rather than because they want to. Moses wants them to be considerate of each other. Ezra understood, and then switched back to her cheerful self. Vesper considered her insane, but he sheathed his hundo. Moses questioned if they really were insane, after what they've been through. They reacted strongly to relatively small things. They laboured under delusions, and were not reactive towards cruelty. For many in the city, overreaction, delusion, and cruelty was standard procedure. Moses, Ezra, and the city had committed a sin. She doesn't want Vesper to be caught into that. It was one of her few wishes. She saw him as having a good heart and a sense of justice. He's a kind of individual rarer than a conversation on social media that doesn't result in an explosion. They walked silently in the mist until they arrived at where the workshop was. They were greeted by a mess. A scene littered with corpses. They could be identified by their dark blue coats and yellow garments. The Zwei Association. That's what was among the dead. Those that deal with public security and protection. At least for those that can fork out the arm. They needed to investigate this crime scene? Is that the right term for this? Considering who this workshop is affiliated with. The story continues in chapter 36, The Bullet. The bullet holes in some of the Zwei corpses were clear, and based on the fixer license on one of them, they were from Section 3 of the Southern Branch. If someone deals with problems without a license, they're considered a syndicate, thug. Yeah, that's the line between a fixer and a syndicate, whether you have a fixer license or not. As for these Zwei fixers, they were shot through the heart. And no, I'm not going to continue that. You know what I'm referring to and what I mean by that. It also made them die with a stream of tears on their faces. Moses asked if thumb bullets were powerful enough to penetrate Section 3 Zwei coats with ease. Well, those coats clearly aren't just for show. They must have some armour woven into them, or they were made by fabric spun by the carnival or similar tailors. Ezra considered it theoretically possible, but bullets capable of making holes in their coats were ruinously expensive. But Moses understood that it's unlikely for the higher-ups that could afford those bullets to be there. She said this as she smoked from her pipe. She searched one of the bodies and picked up one of the bullets, asking Ezra if it's the kind used by the thumb. Vesper answered that it was. He pieced it together, that there was a battle between the Zwei and whoever took the bullets. But the bullets by themselves weren't the cause of the deaths of the 7 fixers from Zwei South Section 3. Ezra identified other corpses. They were not Zwei, believing them to be a thumb subsidiary guarding that workshop. They had their limbs cut off by the Zweihanders that their opponents wielded. It was clear that the Zwei won that battle, but there was a third party. Then someone greeted them, seeing them as fixers on a request. This young male was considered to be the one that killed the fixers, which had ammo capable of penetrating their coats. A considerable threat, even for the 3 of them. And he can also see through that mist. Moses hinted at Ezra to prepare herself. Ezra understood as she equipped her Wind Valley Workshop gauntlet and unleashed her Gale Fist at the one that was there, and Vesper threw his harpoon at him before the mist obscured his sight. Their attacker considered that harsh to pin a metal stick into a stranger's thigh without determining his intent. Moses didn't lower her guard and formed a red sword construct with her pipe, asking if he was the one that killed the fixers from the Zwei Association. He confirmed that he did. There was nothing personal, they were just in the way, all to take the bullets for himself, the marksman of the mist. The more of them he had, the better. Clearly he's not afraid of the head's attention, as too much ammo is against the ethics law. Moses ordered Ezra to be on her guard, and Vesper to disarm him, but not to harm him too badly. The marksman asked if they were there for the pieces of metal as well. Moses ordered Ezra to do her thing. She used a Gale Fist to clear the mist, and Vesper then went for their legs, then found out that he was targeting a decoy. The marksman believed that they were after the bullets. He desired to deliver enlightenment to those wandering in the mist. Seeing what is truly lost is the mind. Ezra shoved Moses out of the way, but whatever Ezra was hit by, it stopped her in her tracks. The marksman of the mist asked them to hold still. It was difficult to know where his voice was coming from, possibly due to multiple loudspeakers. He wanted a deep discussion. He saw himself as a minority in that regard, due to most losing their ways. Yes, losing their way in more ways than one. He seemed capable of seeing them through the fog, so he has the advantage over them. He told her that the mist was merciful to those that haven't lost their way. Moses noted his nonsense philosophy. Ezra was motionless yet tearful. The long bullet was spinning in front of Ezra's heart, rotating, slowly digging into Ezra's chest ever so slowly. Sounds worse than Die Freischutz, the fairy tale version of Ghost Rider. He considered his shot to be too much for Ezra, something tough for any to endure. So it's not just something that attacks the body, it also attacks the mind. Moses told him that they were fixers. They were investigating that place to bring back bullets that belonged to their client, which in this case was the farm. He was confused by the windmill tilting to fetch bullets, involving harpooning people and trying to chop off their ankles. The kind that involves a clearly hostile threat, obviously. He then asked about what happened to the good old way of the fixer, where they're meant to recite some fancy creed like chivalry, bushido, or whatever you want to call it. Well, it depends on the fixer office. While some are quite honourable, others do what they need to for simple survival. Moses asked if he'd let them go if they forfeited their search. He wouldn't. As for what he wanted Vesper to stop prowling around as he's terrifying him. Moses complied with this and told him to stop. As for what he wanted next, he wanted her to accept the bullet instead, stopping the one that was digging into Ezra. Digging into her heart. She agreed to accept it. Vesper was next to her. When he asked if she was okay with that, she nodded. The marksman of the mist had met few that could withstand the bullets. Ezra was still shedding tears, which was what the Section 3 Zwei fixers had on them when they died. A powerful psychological attack. So, this one was either a distortion or a wielder of psychomant. It was a matter of willpower against this one rather than physical endurance. This is literally psychological warfare. The marksman understood that intelligence and a strong will were two different things. Yeah, you can be physically strong, but mentally weak. Just as you can be physically weak, but mentally strong. It depends on what kind of individual you are. She heard a bullet being loaded into a gun. Vesper understood that this could be used to trace the bullet back to its source. She was trusting him to know what she intended to be the bait for. She was then shot, and then there was darkness. She opened her eyes and found herself with a group of people killing others with blades. Some of them that they were attacking tried to defend themselves. She was wearing the same black long coat as they were, with some special accoutrements added to it. They were all wielding curved scimitars, cutting them down like scythes to crops. They were in a massive and antique art gallery with a marble floor, dripping with blood due to this one-sided massacre. She was wearing a mask, which was able to show the personal info of the others among her, such as name and age. She could toggle this display on and off by rubbing the mask. Then one of the masked assistants approached her, referring to her as Captain, who had secured Eunice's family, 4 of them. Even if there was children among them, her moral judgment means nothing. She had to act according to Dia's will. She didn't ask farther than she needed to about the matter. She just gave the order to slaughter them. This was clearly a memory of when she was a captain of the Uchat. Just another of Diaz's minions. It looks like that Moses is about to experience what I could only describe as a highlight reel of what she's now ashamed of. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!